Hi everybody, it's Kate here from Adelaide Conflict Management, and today I want to tell you a story about my dad. It's a painful story, but it's one of those stories which highlights how important it is not to judge people. We're very keen and quick to judge, but we do that often without very much information at all and very unfairly. And today I want to give you an example of how difficult some people's lives can be, but on the outside it looks completely different to what's going on internally for that person. So my story starts in 1930. My dad was born in 1930, and he was born on a sheep station in New South Wales on the banks of the Darling River. By the age of 9, my dad could drive a car, he could ride a horse, he was very much the man about the station during the war, and he was a very capable human being. He married my mum in 1962, and they had a property out at Meadows. And my mum was a nurse, and my dad was a farmer. And that was all going well. And then when I was about 18 months old, and mum was pregnant with my brother, my dad had an epiphany, and he decided to become an Anglican priest. That was a really significant change in the dynamics of my family. It changed things forever. My mum didn't really sign up to be a priest's wife, and my dad went from being relatively well off and comfortable on the farm to being poverty-stricken as an Anglican priest. We basically had no money. And so we moved a lot as children, but the one good thing that came out of all of this, well, there was probably many good things that came out of it, but one of the really good things that came out of this was that because Dad was an Anglican priest, us kids were able to go to posh private schools for basically little or no cost. And that was a saving grace, really, for all of us. So here we were living at Glenunga when I was a teenager. My siblings and I all went to posh private schools, and my dad was a leader in the community. He was the local priest, and my mum was working as a nurse. In the background, if you opened our front door, life was very different to what it looked like on the outside. We had no money. My mum had some significant health issues because she suffered from chronic depression. And my dad was really struggling in how he could meet his bills and manage our family with my mum being so unwell. It was a really awful time. Well, it was the 70s when I was growing up, and so there were two telephones in the house. There was one in the kitchen and there was one in Dad's office. And so when I wanted to speak to my friends or to boys, I would always see if I could get Dad's office. And so I was regularly in there. And when I was exploring his office one day, I discovered under his desk a suitcase, a brown old suitcase. And in that suitcase were hundreds of unopened bills, hundreds of them. So what Dad was doing, because he didn't know how to manage his money at the time, was he'd get a bill in and he would just put it straight into that suitcase. So what would happen is that every few months there'd be a knock on the door, and the debt collectors would come around and organise payment plans with Dad. It was an incredibly stressful and painful time for him. And as you can imagine, what would happen is that if the debt collectors were kind and generous, he was okay, but if they were cruel and judgmental, he would come in that night and just explode, and we were not allowed to do anything, buy anything, look at anything in response to his mood because of those debt collectors. Dad eventually became a psychotherapist, and a whole lot of different things changed, but at the time it was incredibly painful because we really did look like a family that were doing okay on the outside, but we weren't at all. And I tell you that story because I think it's really important that when we're dealing with people who are very stressed, who are behaving in a way that on the outside looks fine, but you know that there's something not quite right, we should ask some questions. We should explore those situations. We should be curious and kind and generous and thoughtful rather than write people off against a whole set of rules that we've created in our own head from our own environmental conditioning over the years. So I tell you that so that you can start thinking about how you deal with people in your workplace, what's going on for them. If people are turning up late for work, if people are underperforming, if people are suddenly behaving in a different manner, what's going on in their life? What do you need to know so that you can help them so that they can deal with that issue and then they can move on. If you'd like to discuss any of this further with me, give me a call. My details are on the website, adelaideconflictmanagement.com.au. Thanks.